Dr. France was awarded her doctorate in philosophy in 2023 from the University of Birmingham for her work on the history of moral rearmament and initiatives of change, and particularly its history as a religious movement and how it adapted to the demands and pressures of a secular age. So, Grace, how did this all begin?
So essentially, I studied history and a master's in history at the University of Birmingham. But my main interest really was in the history of page 3. So really nothing to do with initiatives of change, moral rearmament to begin with. So page 3 was launched in The Sun in 1970. And on page 3 of every edition of The Sun, there was a topless woman. So my research area was really how that came to be. After that, I wanted to explore the Christian sort of anti-page 3 campaigns. That led me into Christian anti-pornography campaigns and the likes of Mary Whitehouse and all of those individuals. That's how I stumbled upon moral rearmament. It was fascinating because I found people decades before in the same position I was as a historian, really trying to make sense of this movement that I couldn't make sense of, because if I saw something from 1930s, it would be completely unrelated to what they were talking about in 1970s from the outside looking in. I know now that there's a core and it's connected. Quite obviously, the 4 absolutes have remained central. That is the core that it always comes back to, honesty, unselfishness, love and purity. That's really the only recognisable thing that hasn't changed. I mean, you had changes of leadership, changes of approach, changes of focus, changes of media tactics, but it always came back to promoting those 4 absolutes. So essentially, my thesis uses moral rearmament from 1920 to 1970 to show how faith can adapt to the modern world and all of the wonderful ways that it does so, whether it's theatre, music, books, and also how it sort of twists theology and influences to meet anxieties of modern people.
You refer at times to the movement as the Christian chameleon.
Yes, it really encompasses what I was making sense. It was the only way I could make sense of moral rearmament. You will have historians argue that religious groups completely abandoned their core principles in order to keep up with the times. But what I was seeing with moral rearmament was it was keeping that core, but being really clever in the way that it marketed what it showed to the outside in order to stay current.
I'm going to challenge you a bit on your assertion that the movement wasn't essentially changed, because you do say at one point, in terms of some of the books or the movement's publications and plays, God seems to have taken the back seat here. Talk about that.
So this, again, was an argument I had with myself for many years, and also something that came up in the Viva when you defend the thesis, because there's 2 schools of thought. One is that the movement stopped using Christian language because it was no longer Christian and it had fundamentally changed. Another, which is the viewpoint that I take, is it stopped making references to God and using Christian language because it was clever in the way that it wanted to attract not only secular individuals, but individuals from another faith. I take that viewpoint because I can see it as a very slow, careful process. It's just a clever play on words, switching phrases like listening to God to quiet time, rewriting manifestos so it's for all men everywhere rather than Christian men. Clever little sidesteps like that, which was sort of what kept me fascinated.
Is there a danger, though, of the experience, the religious experience, and or the Christian experience being watered down, diluted to the point where it's no longer really tangible in some way?
Through the decades, and probably even in this room and in this call, initiatives of change, moral rearmament meant different things to different people. And I think they all take what they want from it. So you can take the Christian element or you can leave it. And this is something that isn't new either. So this is sort of boosted my faith that I wasn't making it all up, that it had the core the same, because the letters to Buckman from the 20s to the 60s depending on whose letters correspondence you were reading, they were in Moral Re-Armament for completely different reasons. You had one person obsessed with the notion of communism, and then you had a lovely group of sisters who, really loved Christ and wanted to lead an honest life. So I think you can never know top down how the message has been received. I think that's the same with every faith. I think people take what they want and leave the rest.
You said, I think, that there was 608 book titles.
There's probably more.
Just in the volume.
Yeah.
About or by Moral Re-Armament authors, addressing a huge number of subjects, from world peace to education to child raising. So each of them has taken something from the message and applied it to a particular niche.
Yeah, and I think that gets us back to that chameleon. Not only did it purposefully become a chameleon, but people see it how they want to see it, in a sense. It's a marketing genius throughout the decades. I think Buckman gets attributed a lot the early decades, and there's that quote about how if he was in America, he would use the word elevator, and here he would use the word lift. So he had like a real astute awareness about where he was, who he was talking to, how he was going to sell it.
Great. It's been a completely fascinating evening. I want to thank you wholeheartedly for everything you've told us tonight. Let's have a huge round of applause for Grace.